All right, so let's talk about some ellipses. It's like a circle, except it gets pulled in one direction longer than the other. So maybe even an oval. There are just a few parts, really. There's two axes. There's the major axis, which is the long one. And then there's the minor axis, which is the short one. Now, on the major axis, the endpoints of the major axis actually have names. These are the vertices. So there's two vertices rather, and then the minor axis endpoints don't really have a name. Also on the major axis are the focal points. And the focal points are actually how the ellipse is drawn. So rather than like a circle where there's one point, there's 2 points. And imagine if we had a string, and then we were to take this string and just sort of keep this string the same length and just create all the points all the way around. So that's how the ellipse is formed. It's from the focal points. So just wanted to kind of go back through that again, because knowing the parts is important to being able to draw these. So on this picture, A is the distance from the center to the vertex. B is the distance on the minor axis from the center to just sort of like the other edge, the short way. And then C is the distance from the center to the focus. This formula is how you find C squared, or you use C squared to find A squared and B squared. With this, I don't know if you can tell by looking at the formulas, but A squared moves. Sometimes it's first, sometimes it's second. A squared is the larger one. I'm just going to jump into this graph because this is really pretty easy to do. So across the top, just like a circle, that controls your center. So we don't have any numbers, so the center here is at 0, 0. From the center, you count all the things. So A squared is the bigger one. So A squared equals 16, which means A is plus or minus 4. Now this lines up underneath the Y, which means we're going to go up and down 4, because it's the direction of the Y. Except that's not a 4. Apparently, I can't find the eraser, so let's try this again. 1, 2, 3, that's only 3. So there's this one. This is your vertex. This is your vertex. It says label the center, so the center's at 0, 0. The vertices are 0, up and down 4. And then the other ones don't have names. So if we look at B squared, that's the little smaller one. B squared is 4, which means B is plus or minus 2. That's underneath the X, so that means we're going to go left and right 2 from the center. There's all of your points, and you just draw the ellipse. Oops, missed. Now, missed again. The the value of C, you don't have to graph the focal points, but the focal points are important. So C squared is equal to A squared minus B squared, or basically big minus small. You'll always be given that formula. So we're going to do 16 minus 4. So C squared is 12. You do need to take the square root of that and keep that in radical form. Now the focal points lie along that same major axis, so they lie along this direction as well. You don't have to graph them, but that helps to know like how to actually give the coordinates, because you will always be asked for that. So we're not moving it left or right. Instead, we're going up and down 2 radical 3 from the center, which is of course 0, 0. If we move the center away from 0 and 0, we have these other equations. If you look at the blue paper with the side without the pictures, this is what you get on the test. So you get all of this on the test. And again, I just have this listed again here. It's the same formula. To go backwards from a picture, the pattern for an ellipse is 2 fractions with a plus sign in between, always equals 1. Always equals 1. So that's important. We can control this by always doing x squared first, because what comes first doesn't matter, and then y squared after that. So let's find our center here. The center looks like -4, 4. So we do the opposite, so x plus 4 quantity squared, y minus 4 quantity squared. Along the direction of y, this space is looks like 3. And along the direction of x, the space is 2. So underneath x squared will go the 4, and underneath the y goes the 9, because you got to square those when you put them in. Take the square root when you take them out. It's that easy. To go and write the equation based on some information, the graph is here, but only to help you kind of orient yourself and not really to draw the graph. So we have a focus here and a focus here. The center is the midpoint between the two focal points. So that way we know the center is at 0, 0. So right away, we can do x squared over something plus y squared over something equals 1. Now we need to just know a and b. Well, it tells you that a equals 7. Okay. If this is the direction that the focal points are lying, this is your major axis. This is, of course, x. So underneath x goes a squared. Now all we need is b squared. The distance from the center to the focal point is your little c, and that clearly is a 2. So while the center is at 0, 0, the value for c is 2. So now we're going to use the fact that c squared equals a squared minus b squared. So 4 is equal to 49 minus b squared. When we subtract 49 from both sides, you get negative 45 equals negative b squared. So that means they're both positive, and you just put that underneath the y. This is the equation of the ellipse. Now we're going to have to use completing the square, and we're going to have to factor. So the first thing we have to do is we're going to group together the families. So we have 9x squared and then minus 18x. Then we'll do the y family, plus 4y squared minus plus 16y, and the 11 is good. It stays over there. So within the x's, we have to factor out a 9, because completing the square means x squared is a coefficient of 1. Complete the square inside the parentheses. For the y's, we'll factor out a 4, making this coefficient 1. Complete the square inside the parentheses, and then, of course, over here, we'll be adding 2 numbers. Half of 2 is 1, 1 squared is 1. But you really have to multiply by the 9 out there. So we really added 9 to the other side. Half of 4 is 2, 2 squared is 4, that goes in here. And again, you multiply by the number outside, so 16 goes over here. You leave these numbers here. We haven't got, well, there's no way to get rid of them yet, so we're going to leave them. On this side, you do what it says, so we get 36. Now, this number is in charge. We want this to equal a 1, so we have to go backwards now and divide everything by 36. When you divide, actually do the division upside down. Think about 36 divided by 9 and put the number in the bottom. 36 divided by 4, put that number in the bottom, and this, of course, will be a 1. We want these to have a denominator. So x minus 1 quantity squared over 4 plus y plus 2 quantity squared over 9 is equal to 1. Now they're asked for the focal points. Everything comes from the center. Your center is opposite, opposite. Now we need c squared. So we know that c squared is equal to a squared minus b squared. So c squared is equal to 5, so c is plus or minus radical 5. This is the bigger number, which means the major axis is along the y. So if it's along the y, then the focal points get added and subtracted to the y value. So the focal points will be at 1, then negative 2, plus or minus radical 5. You don't actually have to do the addition and the subtraction unless, of course, it's 2 whole numbers. Like if it was 2 plus or minus plain 5, you'd have to do that. But if it's square root, you don't, which is why I leave it in radical form. So this is the focal points, and this is the standard form.